Thought I might also mention the tools I used for doing this. It's nothing amazing. Thought I might also mention the tools I used for doing this. It's nothing amazing. You don't need a lens tool. All I had is a set of, I consider them nice. They're not like watchmakers or anything. I think they're usually sold as cell phone repair screwdrivers, but I got a set of flats from 0.5 millimeter on up to 2. And I was actually using those quite a bit because they're good for poking tools and tiny lifting levers and things, but there are also slotted screws in the camera. And then I've got a Phillips number 0. I think this is a 00. Yeah, 00. I've got a 000, but I actually didn't use it on this thing. There aren't any screws that are that small, and some of the small screws that I did try to use it on, it didn't fit all that well. I ended up using the 00 and worked fine. And then this is the best I could come up with for those tiny snap rings. These came as a set of 4. They were the only small snap ring pliers I could find, and I actually even still had to grind these down to get them to finally fit on those tiny snap rings. And even still, they don't even work all that great. You're really having to cross your fingers to get them to come off of there. But that was it. Paint markers for marking screws. Needle nose pliers, maybe. One of the most important things is these needle point tweezers. They're just cheap Pakistan or Taiwan, but they come to a really sharp, fine point. And there we go. They're non-magnetic, it seems, which is really nice for working on these tiny screws and stuff. You can grab them and put them down and they actually go down, or you're not attracting anything else while you're working there. So these are really a must, or for holding tiny screws in place while you get them started. These have really been a big help, or for putting the diaphragm blades on, since they're so thin and they're metal, but they're like a soda can, and they have to stay perfectly flat. So you can just pick them up with these and gently place them and wiggle them around without getting fingerprints on them and things. So I got my hands on a MInox ML 35 millimeter camera. I've got a PL that I fixed, but I like the idea of the ML better. There's discussions of the shutter mechanism being better, and having the program mode and the aperture override seemed cool. And they used to be cheap, and I got this one off eBay, like all of these things nowadays. It was like $40, so the price had dropped down enough again that I decided to get one and see what I could do. This one was listed as not powering on with the battery, and I figured, yeah, what the heck, I'll give it a shot and see what I can do. So what I'm figuring on doing here is kind of going over some of the things I've noticed and learned off of this thing. I've torn kind of everything apart on it, but I look like I'm on the edge of, I've got it working, I just got to get it back together. So talk about some of the things I've learned, how I think it works, and what else was I going to do? Something quirky or interesting about it. So I don't know. We'll do a couple sections on whatever I happen to see what comes up. So what's first? It's a 35 millimeter camera, really tiny, like all of these MInox 35s. The way it works is a completely electronic shutter where the actual shutter button has a silver post and a copper contact, and the post actually just disengages the feed. What do they call that? I'll call it a lockout. So you can't double feed it. So really that's all that does, but it won't press unless the door is all the way out. I found that out messing with it. And what actually fires the shutter is the copper contact here. And that copper contact is actually just a physical contact underneath the circuit board. And there's some other contacts under there. And it's just a micro thin circuit board. Everything on this thing is small and weird. So the first thing I went after was the power situation, and I went out and bought, where is it? Step one when working on one of these things is have a clean area. I took a crapshoot and didn't want to clean it up, so I've been dealing with the mess, but I've been doing fine. Clean area, because if anything does escape, you need to be able to find it. Oh, there's the battery. So the battery goes in the front. I actually went out to eliminate the problem and bought the right battery and put it in, and I was getting nothing, and then I got something. And the exposure test, if you wind it once or twice, you can push the shutter button here and you'll get an LED inside indicating your exposure, or there's a battery test, which is these two contacts. If you push a button on the top, you'll have an LED light up inside. Sometimes it would come on, sometimes it wouldn't. So I knew it wasn't all bad. There was just something going on somewhere. And frankly, power problems are kind of easy to figure out. You can poke around and figure out what's going on. So that's why I tore the top off, so I could poke around and see where the power was getting or not getting. And the guts on the top here are fairly simple and robust, I'd say. Underneath here, there's an old, at least to me, what I remember seeing in calculators as a kid, taking them apart, that black embedded chip. So there's an actual computer chip under there. But there's nothing really electronically up here to go bad, as long as it doesn't get wet or really hurt. But what I was finding is a lot of dirty contacts. So I just got some contact cleaner, and I was just spraying on everything I could while I had the board off. I was cleaning the little contact, like for the shutter switch and anywhere else I could find. But one of the biggest pains in the butts on these 35s is they use these tiny snap rings. They're only about a 3mm hole, and just finding a pair of snap ring pliers is a nightmare. And then of course they're in these delicate areas where you can't really get a lot of grasp on them to take them apart. So that's aggravating. But yeah, so dirty contacts on the top, dirty contacts inside the battery compartment, down in there, up on top. And from there, the way the electrical system works, well, you're not going to be able to see it. Here. So on here, this badly printed section on top of the shutter and lens box, there's actually a series of spring contacts right up in the top here. And so they're fixed on the shutter box, and there's a series of lengthened contacts underneath attached to the body. So when the lens slides in and out, those contacts engage and disengage. And that's how you get power to the shutter. And that's also why it's a completely electronic shutter, because there's nothing mechanical coupling any of this button business with anything in here. The only thing, well, I shouldn't say that. Mechanically, when it winds up, there's a couple levers that move the shutter mechanism, but to actually make it fire is totally electronic. So if you have no power, you have no shutter, which is kind of an interesting or easy way to check of if you've got power going anywhere besides the easy check of the light on top. What next? So I sprayed some contact cleaner in here and worked it back and forth. Carefully sprayed some contact cleaner around the shutter area and worked it as much as I could. The problem with doing that is your lens is going to get grubby. You might get into your viewfinder too. But the viewfinder, I didn't get into it much, but it kind of cleaned itself, so I didn't worry about it. The lens is a different story. You got to take it down to its pieces, which actually isn't too bad. But one of the things with the shutter is almost everything in here, any surface, any component, any spring, seems like is an electrical contact for something in the process. So everything has to be clean and in the right position, and it's confusing, for lack of a better term. I can't think of a good way to put it. I haven't actually taken this stuff out because there's wires on the top, and they're like, I can't find any, but they're like 36 gauge, just micro wires, and I don't even want to get into them. I don't even want to try, but I didn't have to. So if you get your contacts clean, that got my power up and going. I would consistently be able to do the battery test and check my exposure, and it would change based on where I rotated the aperture ring. So I took that as a good sign, but it still wasn't firing. So what I did is there's a couple, if you look around online how to MInox 35 shutter adjustment, there's an old post about these two screws. And hang on. These two screws and how you can adjust the shutter stroke with them. And all that does is, that's the final lever for the winding lever. So as you wind this, there's a little finger inside that pivots upwards and cocks the shutter ring. And that does get out of whack. This was out of whack when I first got it, but that didn't fix the problem I was having. And what it ended up being was, okay, so now the way that these things work, as near as I can tell, is, as I said a couple of times, it's all electronic. And you've got two magnets. You've got a magnet at the top and a magnet at the bottom. And the way that it works is these are permanent magnets. And when you cock it, there's a tiny lever there and a tiny lever. Okay. So the tiny lever at the top, and then on this end, there's another tiny lever. They look almost the same. And what those are the magnet contact pads. And they're basically the lock for the shutter components. And what happens, let me get that ring back in. As I said, everything in this thing is electrical contact, and if that ring's not on there, there's a little component in there that pushes on a bronze spring. And if that spring isn't pushed right, it seems like it makes things mad. So we're all back together. All right, so you've got your little magnet levers. And as you cock the shutter, top one goes first. So we'll see if we can get it to show. Here we go. So we're looking right there. That's the lever, and that's the magnet. So as you cock the shutter, that lever moves inward until it's in contact with that magnet. So that's the first stroke. And on the second stroke, there we are. We've got a similar lever down here. There we go. Lever, magnet. And right now they're in contact. And hopefully I can get this to work. And there's a lock. This point right here is the locking surface, and there's a lug that rotates around. And on the second stroke, it comes back and rests against that tooth right there. Oh, I guess it was already there. Well, anyways, my problem I was having was as soon as that second cock would happen, this magnet arm would pull away from this magnet surface. And as a result, that lug would rotate up, and it would upset some sort of an electrical goblin inside, and some switch was not registering properly, and it wouldn't fire. It would click. It would click. This lever would release, but this one was essentially already released, and it wouldn't fire the shutter blades. Somewhere I read that this lower one is the close magnet, and this is the open magnet. And the way the blades work is there's sort of two pins on each. There's 3 blades and two motion pins on each one, so it can kind of lever in multiple directions. And that's how I think this functions as the close and this functions as the open, because those pivot pins attached to the blades are attached to different shutter rings. There's a lower ring, and there's an upper ring, and they're semi-coupled together and complicated. Okay, so I was looking at this thing, and this thing kept popping off every time I cocked it. Once in a blue moon, it would stick, and then the shutter would fire. So I thought maybe this magnet had gone weak or needed an adjustment so it was closer to the finger or something. All right, so it fired, and now you can see that magnet finger is no longer touching that magnet bar, and this one there we go, is no longer touching that magnet. All right, so I ended up unscrewing these, and when you do that, the whole lens body just kind of falls out of the front, but it stays attached with a couple of wires. That's not really what I wanted, but I eventually took it as what I get, but it gave me access to this magnet, and I started nudging it around gently with a screwdriver and figuring out what was going on or how I could move it. And then I noticed this slotted screw right here, which doesn't really look like much from the top. This one should have one too, somewhere buried under there. But with the lens pulled forward, I was able to see how it worked, and that's actually an adjustment screw. It's got it's probably a 3 by 0.5 screw that goes down the side, and there's actually a wedge that it's threaded into. And if you turn this screw counterclockwise, it pushes that wedge downward, which then pushes the magnet towards the contact plate. So I was able to get in there with this screwdriver, and I don't remember how much I turned it, but I basically gave this a couple of twists until that magnet stuck. And as soon as I did that, this thing started firing. And I've checked it a bunch of times today since. It's firing on program. It's firing on each of the f-stop settings. The exposure meter in the window is changing with the settings. And I think I'm on the track to getting it working. Another problem I had was when I was messing with this, somehow the shutter blades had gotten kind of jammed together. So that was part of why I ended up taking the whole lens assembly apart. And it's really not that bad. There's nothing spring-loaded that's going to jump out at you. The blades, there's only 3 blades, and they're just gently sitting there, but they're micro thin and all that kind of stuff. So small tools, small tweezers, and keep it clean. But it really wasn't that bad to undo them. The iris, or the aperture iris, is 2 pieces, like some lobster claws that come around, and here it is. There's just a little point here that's spring-loaded that goes in and out to control the iris. And the shutter computer actually doesn't do anything with that when it does it in program mode. It seems like the way it does is it changes how much the shutter blades open, and that's how it controls the aperture setting in the automatic mode. Another thing that's quirky, I think it's the same situation with this shutter board, but the circuit board for your film speed dial, it's actually a ceramic printed circuit board. And on my PL, part of the reason it didn't work was it seemed like this button had gotten hit, like dropped or hit on something, which pushed it into the case, and it cracked that ceramic circuit board inside. So I actually had to go in and solder across it, and it's all carbon contacts all the way around. So then I had to go in and paint on it with some carbon conductive paint, and it works. I don't know if it's right, but I did some shutter tests on it and it seemed like the relationship was pretty consistent across the dial. But even still, I looked up ceramic circuit boards, and the only place they're used is military and space and just super high-end techno-critical stuff. There's no reason to use it on this thing. It must have cost, I don't know how much more to do ceramic circuit boards, when they could have just taken a piece of this, stuck it down there, and done the same job. And I think it has the same look, this shutter board inside. It looks like that ceramic stuff, from what I can tell. So that's another, it's like, why would you do that? It's just so overkill, but not in a beneficial way that I can see anyways. I mean, there's no high voltages here. You're not worried about solar radiation or EMPs or anything. I can't find, maybe there's a reason, I don't know. But I couldn't find any good explanation for doing a ceramic circuit board in something just essentially a consumer product. What else? I've been verifying the shutter today, so I haven't been putting it back together. And I wanted to get a picture of how this magnet adjuster works before I got it all together. And I think that's about it. I didn't really do anything else or have to do anything else. If you're working on one, it's really better, seems like, to do one component at a time. Like, if you want to work on the shutter, you're probably gonna have to take the lens off too, but leave it at that. This top should be on. This top should be all back together, because if you want to work on the lens and the shutter, you don't need to worry about the top. You don't need to worry about the bottom. If you want to work on the top, you don't have to worry about the shutter. It just keeps parts from getting confused and lost. It looks like there's a way to pull out this entire lens box from the side. You take out a couple of screws, and it either comes out the back or the front as a single piece with the lens. And I think that'd be easier to work on, but there's a lot of levers and stops and stuff that control the door opening and locking and all that kind of stuff. And I was deep into this thing enough already. I didn't want to get into that. But if you can figure out how, I think that would be a lot easier, because all the wires and things that keep the shutter attached to the body are only attached to this box. There's nothing between this shutter box and the body except for that bunch of contacts on the top. So if you can get this out, you can work on it independently from anything else. And cleaning the lens. I've got all this mark all over it because I've got some paint markers, something I've done from working on cars, and you mark your screws and where they go, so you know where they go. Pink goes with pink, blue goes with blue, yellow goes with yellow. So if you've got a couple of paint markers on hand, I've had good luck with that. Maybe the paint could chip off and get into a picture, but I don't think so. They're oil-based. They're probably pretty stable. I'm going to lock this, all this red stuff in here is, I'm pretty sure, like a surface thread locker to keep that magnet screw in position. I'm going to do some nail polish on that head to hold it down. And hopefully that'll work. And what else? There's a trick I've got for, actually, you know what? I'll show it. So one of the hard things that suck on these is right across from this. Come on. There we go. Can you see it? There it is. So right next to the white mark here, that is a spring-loaded plunger that makes the detent click and stay. And to get this cover back on, if you got in there to clean the contacts or replace the board or whatever, somehow you have to get that spring pin in position when you snap the cover down. So what I found, I don't think I read it somewhere. I think I figured this out, but I don't know. I could have gotten the idea. I got this piece of, it's 1 or 2 thousandths thick stainless steel shim, and it fits, really. So it fits between the body and that knob. So what you have to do is you have to practice a little bit and do it somewhere, because there's actually a surprising amount of spring tension on that pin. So do this somewhere where if that thing goes flying, you will find it again. So what you do is this got a little curve to it. You put it in with this cover off. You put this in so the curve is right over that spring-loaded nub, and then you thread the cover over this so that this is now between the side, and you can kind of use this to push against that pin enough to get the cover to wiggle down and then snap it in position. You might be able to do it with a soda can. I don't remember if I did or not, but it needs to be pretty rigid because, again, that's a surprisingly strong little spring. I'll give it a couple of minutes and see if I can think of anything else that... if you take off the lens, the front focus ring, as near as I can tell, doesn't have any sort of a realignment position. So if you do this, you're probably going to have to re-zero or recollimate is the word that I'm going to use. Recollimate your lens to back to infinity, because all this fancy stuff and the focus lens or focus ring just has a couple of set screws that bite down on the ring. That's it. So I think I'm going to have to recalibrate it. But fortunately, it's on the outside, and so it's a pain in the butt, but it's not impossible. It's also a lot bigger than the MInox B that I've done before. Trying to refocus an 8mm film gate is just a nightmare because it's just so small you can't really even see what you're doing. Whereas this should be nice and big on that film plane there. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I think that's it. I'm gonna probably put a few more parts back together on it and then do a lot more testing on the shutter and make sure it's working every single time. But I think that that's the guy that did it, because I was trying everything and I couldn't get it to go. I was starting to worry that the lock keeper on that magnet arm was just physically worn out, and I'm not going to get one of those. But then I was poking with a screwdriver and feeling the magnet grab at the top and the bottom, and it was really strong at the top, and I could barely feel it at the bottom. And I was thinking, maybe my magnet's gone. And I was looking closer, and it looked like this one was projecting farther than that one. So I thought, maybe there's a way I can do this. And sure enough, that slotted screw, it's exactly what it's for. So I don't know if this will apply to every camera. I don't know if it applies to other models. But between these two screws, adjusting your shutter cocking stroke and being able to adjust these magnets, as long as everything else is in line, I think that'll do it. So we'll have to see.